Everybody, welcome back to Leosophy. This is the first installment of the Herbalism series, and so I thought I would use this episode to talk about a few components about herbalism. So, one, what is it? And two, is it woo-woo? And three, just dispelling a few other myths. So, what is herbalism? Herbalism is a practice wherein somebody uses the parts of certain plants in order to prevent or treat certain illnesses or disorders. That's it in a nutshell. And it ties in directly with Western medicine in some respects, and it diverges greatly in others. So, is herbalism woo-woo? And I would argue that 99% of herbalism is not, is entirely scientifically founded, and then there's that 1% that is woo-woo. But for the most part, it's actually not. And the third thing I wanted to address in this video, I mean, I know it seems like I'm going lightning fast, but the reason why it's the third is a lot more complex, and that is why is herbalism often frowned upon, and why is it often criticized as pseudoscience, particularly by people who are firmly entrenched in using Western medicine? Well, there are several reasons, but there's a lot of overlap between herbalism and modern Western medicine. For example, if you take aspirin, congrats, you're using simply a concentrated and more intensely dosed version of a plant. And similarly, if you go to a doctor, they might prescribe a medicine that's origins are botanical in nature, but has simply been converted into a capsule or an injection. And this is very, very common. And the reason why it's often criticized is, well, one, the people who gravitate towards herbalism might be under the impression that because it's natural, it's better than Western medicine, which is a fallacy. Additionally, when you're dealing with plants, you are dealing with lower doses, and you are dealing with more uncertain quantities of whatever the active ingredient is. Because when you're dealing with a pill, for example, it's pretty exact. You know, if you want, 15 milligrams of insert compound here, that's what you're going to get in a pill. You're not going to get that with a plant. It's just not the case. But one fundamental term that really bothers me, and that's sort of what this first episode is, it's a platform to talk about that, is that holistic and New Age and pseudoscience are not interchangeable terms. In fact, I would argue that the lifespan in a lot of states, especially when it comes to drug overdoses, directly corresponds with the view of the word holistic. Because if you go to states where people tend to live longer and are less likely to have an overdose, doctors will use that word. They're fine with it because it just means, all holistic means is looking at every factor. That's it. That's seriously it. So, perfect example, and this is not me saying that one state is better than another. In fact, I'd actually rather live in the state I'm going to criticize more here in a minute. But, so, if you go to a doctor in California or New Mexico or New York, and you are 800 pounds and you are so diabetic that you're pissing maple syrup, and you mention that you want something to treat your blood pressure, a statin, for example, that doctor, who gets paid a lot because they live in such a hoity-toity area, is going to take a holistic view, and they're going to say, well, I'm going to refer you to a nutritionist. I'm going to prescribe you the blood pressure medicine, but I'm going to refer you to a nutritionist because a lot of your problem is the fact that you're 800 pounds and you need to get off that weight first and foremost. Otherwise, this medicine is not going to be of tremendous help. Whereas if you go to Idaho and you go to the same doctor, they're going to view holistic, the concept, as pseudoscience. They look at things purely from a pharmacological perspective. And so you go in there and you're 800 pounds and you're so diabetic that you're pissing maple syrup, and you say, I'm having complications from my diabetes, I'm having all sorts of cardiovascular issues, above and beyond all of those other things, though, I need a statin because my blood pressure is a problem. That doctor's going to say, yeah, okay, and that's it. They're not going to address the obesity. They're not going to address the fact that you're eating 5 pints of Haagen-Dazs a day. They're not going to address the fact that you need to exercise. They're not going to address the fact that you're so stressed out from work that your cortisol levels are through the roof. They're not going to look at any of those things. They're going to look purely at it from a pharmacological standpoint and not address any other factor that could have a tremendous impact on your well-being. That's what holistic means. It means that you're looking at all those facets. So there are plenty of Western doctors who would proudly proclaim that they have a holistic perspective on things. It's not synonymous with pseudoscience. And I have noticed that when you go to areas where it is associated with pseudoscience, that's where you end up with these, what I would criticize as drug dealer doctors, because their perspective on human health is purely one of a chemical nature and not anything else, which is rather remarkable, really. So, I mean, I'm absolutely astonished. Speaking of which, that was the pharmacy. So yeah, that right there should be proof that I am an advocate still for Western medicine. That was my pharmacy. Anyway, yeah, it doesn't mean, holistic does not mean woo-woo. It's not the same thing as crystal therapy. It's not the same thing as chakra opening. It's not the same thing as rubbing cow piss on your forehead to prevent certain diseases. It's not the same thing as essential oils, which does have a tie-in with herbalism, however. And that's part of it when I'm going to mention that some of herbalism is pseudoscientific. Not all essential oils are pseudoscience, but a lot of them, for what they're used for, would be. Perfect example of them being perfectly viable, though, for certain conditions. Let's say I'm a licensed herbalist. Let's say that a woman came to me and said that they were having tremendous trouble with morning sickness because of just sensitivity to different odors, particularly the smell of exhaust when they're driving to work. I would actually say, well, here's bee balm oil. Put this on a tissue, and whenever you feel a bout of nausea, sniff that tissue. And that sounds maybe like it would be pseudoscience. It almost sounds like what they would do during the plague, to prevent miasma from getting into your nose with the floral bouquets and all that. But there's actually a very logical reason. So what's happening is she's responding to what she perceives as a negative stimulus, and she's getting nauseous. Well, bee balm would cover up that stimulus, one, and two, even smelling it, the same thing applies for ginger. Even smelling it actually has tremendous anti-nausea properties. Now, why is this? We're actually not 100% sure what the mechanism is for ginger, but perfect example, if you go to a real Western medical doctor who is well versed in treating things from a holistic perspective, they might actually prescribe, if you said you had motion sickness or something, they might say, well, you know what, you should actually have crystallized ginger or something for this, boat trip, rather than saying, oh, well, here's a prescription ready antiemetic that will help you less with than what would actually work on a natural level. So the thing to take home here is that herbalism is not an inherently pseudoscientific process. It simply differs tremendously from modern Western medicine in both the fact that doses are not standardized and that the chief way of preventing and treating certain ailments is the use of herbs. That's why it's called herbalism. It is not a complete means of diagnosing or treating any illness, but it absolutely does have its place in just improving the quality of life of a number of people who would benefit from it. That's pretty much what it means. So from there, the future episodes, I'm going to be dividing certain herbs into certain classes and how they can be used to prevent or treat certain conditions. And this episode, the last thing I would like to cover is just the fact that there are three branches of herbalism. I am a Western herbalist. That means I focus on the traditional European means of treating diseases. I am not any of the other two, which is a traditional Chinese herbalist, which focuses on a lot of things that I would regard to be pseudoscientific. There's certainly things that work, by the way. There's things that work in all three that I'm going to mention, and there's things that don't work in all three that I'm going to mention in future episodes. But I am not a Chinese or Eastern, I think is actually a better term, herbalist, and I'm not an Ayurvedic herbalist. There are merits to those two, but I do think the one that stands the test of time better is the Western tradition. And the reason for that is because it actually did evolve alongside the scientific method and has precursor in modern Western medicine, which is what is practiced around the world, because it does absolutely work within the context of actually treating, diagnosing, and contending with a number of disorders and diseases. So that's all I've got right now. The next episodes, I'm going to be breaking down certain categories of herbs and how they might be used. And in future episodes, I'm going to discuss means of drying them, cultivating them, etc., even identifying them maybe. That one's going to be a little harder, though, just because it's still going to be me and not me in the woods. But like, share, subscribe, keep asking questions. Bye.